Secrets We Keep. Chapter 1. In a quaint, sunlit town, where secrets fluttered like autumn leaves, Lillian sat on the edge of her bed, the weight of unspoken truths heavy upon her heart. At 16, she was caught in the delicate web of adolescence, her world shifting beneath her feet like sand. Her mother, Marissa, stood at the doorway, silhouetted by the sunlight spilling in from the hallway, a familiar yet distant figure. "Are you ready for dinner?" Marissa's voice was soft, but Lillian could sense the underlying tension. They had been navigating this new life together since she married Harold, Lillian's stepfather, and it felt as though a chasm had opened between them. "Just a minute," Lillian replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned her gaze to the window, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was beautiful, yet it felt like a cruel reminder of the joy that seemed to elude her. The decision to keep their true connection hidden weighed heavily on Lillian. Marissa had insisted that it was for the best, that revealing the truth would only complicate their lives. But what was the truth? Lillian often found herself lost in the maze of her thoughts, questioning the very fabric of her existence. "Lillian," her mother called again, this time a hint of impatience creeping into her tone. "We need to talk. Where are you? I've been waiting for you on the phone for days." Lillian sighed and reluctantly stepped out of her room. The dining table was set with care. Delicate china and polished silverware glinted under the chandelier, a stark contrast to the turmoil that brewed in her heart. Harold and Ethan, her new stepbrother, were already seated, engaged in quiet conversation. Ethan, with his tousled hair and easy smile, had an effortless charm that made her feel both at ease and uneasy. As Lillian took her seat, she felt the familiar pang of conflict rise within her. Ethan was kind and supportive, a brother in every sense except blood. Yet, the unspoken truth between them created an invisible barrier. They both knew the secret that kept them apart, even if they never voiced it. "Lillian, can you pass the bread?" Harold asked, breaking the tension. His voice was warm, filled with fatherly affection, but Lillian couldn't shake the feeling that something pivotal was at stake. "Sure." She reached for the breadbasket, her fingers brushing against Ethan's as he did the same. A jolt of electricity coursed through her, an all too familiar sensation that made her heart race. She quickly withdrew her hand, chastising herself for the way her body reacted. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowing slightly. There was genuine concern in his eyes, but Lillian couldn't meet his gaze. Instead, she focused on her plate, where the food lay untouched, a stark reminder of the turmoil within. "Just a little tired," she mumbled, grateful for the distraction of the food. As they continued to eat, laughter and conversation flowed around her, but Lillian felt like a ghost, drifting through their warmth, yet distanced by her secret. After dinner, they retreated to the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. It was here, amidst the laughter and light, that Lillian felt the most alone. She could see the bond forming between Ethan and Harold, a bond that she feared would leave her isolated in her own home. "Lillian, want to join us for a game?" Ethan called, his voice bright with enthusiasm. "Sure," she replied, forcing a smile. The game was a simple one, but as she played, Lillian felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her. Every laugh, every teasing remark exchanged between Ethan and Harold felt like a reminder of the invisible wall between them. As the evening wore on, Lillian decided to escape to her room. She needed to breathe, to think. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart pounding. The secret was like a shadow that loomed over her, and no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, it remained. In the quiet of her room, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her emotions. She missed the simplicity of her old life, the clarity of truth. She was caught in a lie that was her mother's doing, yet it felt as though it were hers to carry. The moonlight streamed through her window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Lillian sat on the edge of her bed, her thoughts racing. She wanted to confide in Ethan, to share the truth that clung to her like a second skin. But what would she say? That they were not merely step-siblings, but bound by blood in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. Lillian closed her eyes, envisioning a different life, one where she and Ethan could laugh and play without the burden of secrets. But in this life, the truth was a ghost, haunting her every moment, whispering of what could have been. And so, as she lay down to sleep, the lie began to take root, entwining itself with her very being, casting a shadow over her heart that would be hard to dispel. She knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test the very fabric of her identity and the relationships she held dear. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges and revelations, but for now, Lillian surrendered to the silence of her room, the weight of the world pressing down on her, and the lie that had just begun to unfold. Chapter 2. The dawn broke gently over the sleepy town, casting a golden hue across the rooftops as Lillian awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. For a fleeting moment, she savored the tranquility of the morning, the sun spilling warmth into her room like a promise of comfort. Yet, as reality settled in, she was reminded of the disquiet that accompanied her new life. After her mother's marriage to Harold, the landscape of Lillian's existence had shifted dramatically, like a painting reimagined with bold strokes. The home she had known was replaced by a sprawling house filled with unfamiliar echoes and shadows. Lillian had long cherished the small, cozy abode where laughter danced in the air like fireflies. Now, in this house of grandeur, laughter felt stifled, replaced by an undercurrent of tension and hidden truths. With a sigh, she pushed herself out of bed, her feet touching the cool wooden floor. She dressed quickly, opting for a simple blouse and jeans, a testament to her desire for comfort over the formality that the new household often demanded. As she made her way downstairs, the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the faint aroma of pancakes, a welcome invitation to join the family at breakfast. "Good morning, Lillian," Harold greeted her with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, his presence warm and reassuring. He was a man of stature with a kind demeanor that belied the authority he held in the household. Lillian had grown accustomed to his easy laughter, though a part of her remained wary. "Morning," she murmured, taking her seat at the table where Ethan was already devouring a stack of pancakes, his mouth full, yet somehow managing to beam at her through a mouthful of syrupy goodness. "Hey, you're just in time," Ethan exclaimed, his enthusiasm infectious. "I saved you the biggest pancake." He slid a plate toward her, and she couldn't help but smile at his playful nature, a contrast to the serious undertones of their shared secret. "Thanks," she replied, her voice lightening as she forked a piece of the fluffy pancake. In that moment, the weight of her secret felt momentarily lifted, replaced by the simple joy of being included in a familial ritual. As they sat together, the conversation flowed easily. Harold shared stories from his work, his voice a soothing backdrop to the clinking of cutlery and the rustling of napkins. Lillian caught Ethan's eye, and for a brief moment, The air thickened with unspoken words. They both understood that under the surface of their camaraderie lay a complexity that could not be addressed in the light-hearted banter of breakfast. When the meal concluded, Lillian felt a tug of responsibility to help clear the table. She rose, taking her plate to the sink, while Harold and Ethan retreated to the living room to prepare for the day. As she scrubbed the dishes, her mind drifted to the intricacies of her new life. The days had passed in a blur since her mother's wedding. Each morning brought with it a fresh set of dynamics to navigate. Harold's firm yet caring nature, Ethan's youthful exuberance, and her mother's quiet determination to maintain harmony in their new family unit. Yet, beneath the surface of this newfound normalcy, a tempest brewed in Lillian's heart. Once the dishes were washed and set to dry, she ventured toward the living room. Harold was engrossed in the newspaper, while Ethan was idly flipping through channels on the television, the glow of the screen illuminating his features. Lillian settled beside him, her heart racing as she fought against the tide of emotions that swirled within her. "Do you want to watch something?" Ethan asked, his finger hovering over the remote. His casual demeanor disarmed her, yet the unacknowledged tension lingered like a ghost in the room. "Sure," she replied, her voice steadied despite the tumult inside. They settled into a comfortable silence, the world outside fading as they became absorbed in the flickering images on the screen. Moments passed, and Lillian found herself drifting into a reverie, her thoughts tangled in the threads of her new reality. The house, once foreign, was beginning to feel like a space she could inhabit, yet every corner whispered secrets. Each laughter shared with Ethan felt like a dance on the edge of a precipice, a balancing act between loyalty to her mother and the burgeoning affection she felt for him. After a while, Harold glanced up from his newspaper, breaking the spell. "Ethan, don't forget we have that meeting later," he reminded, his tone authoritative yet gentle. Ethan groaned, rolling his eyes playfully. "Do we have to? I was hoping for a day of freedom." "Responsibilities come first," Harold replied, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "But I promise we'll have time for fun afterward." With a resigned nod, Ethan turned off the television. "All right, I'll get ready." He stood stretching like a cat, and Lillian couldn't help but admire his carefree spirit. "Do you need any help?" she offered, the words escaping her lips before she could think them through. Ethan paused, his expression shifting to one of surprise and delight. "Actually, yes. If you're not too busy, you could help me pick out what to wear. I have no idea what to expect at this meeting." "Of course," Lillian said, her heart leaping at the prospect of spending more time with him. They ascended the staircase together, the air thick with the unspoken connections that bound them. Once in Ethan's room, Lillian was struck by its disarray. Clothes strewn about, basketball trophies adorning the shelves, and posters of famous athletes plastered on the walls. Here was a space that felt alive, filled with the essence of a boy navigating the throes of adolescence. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, holding up two shirts, one a deep blue, the other a crisp white. "Blue for confidence or white for professionalism?" "Blue," Lillian replied without hesitation. "It suits you." "Good choice," he beamed, tossing the white shirt aside. "Now, what about pants?" As they rummaged through the chaos of his wardrobe, Lillian felt a sense of ease wash over her. For the first time since the wedding, the weight of her secret seemed to lift, replaced by the simplicity of friendship. Each laugh they shared, each playful jab, chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. "You know," Ethan said, pulling on a pair of navy slacks that complemented the blue shirt, I've been thinking, we should do something fun together this weekend. Just us." The invitation struck her like a bolt of lightning. "What did you have in mind?" she asked, her heart pounding at the prospect of spending more time with him. "Maybe a hike? There's a beautiful trail not too far from here. We could pack a picnic." His eyes sparkled with excitement, and Lillian felt a rush of exhilaration. "I'd love that," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But beneath the exhilaration lay an undertow of fear. The more time they spent together, the more complicated her emotions became. It was a delicate balance, one that she felt could easily tip into chaos. As Ethan finished getting ready, Lillian's mind raced with thoughts of the weekend. The prospect of adventure filled her with both joy and dread. How could she enjoy a day of freedom when the truth of their connection loomed over her like a heavy fog? When Ethan finally emerged, looking polished and ready, she felt a pang of admiration. He exuded the kind of confidence that made her heart race, a dangerous allure that both thrilled and terrified her. "Ready?" he asked, his voice earnest. "Always," she replied, forcing a smile that belied her inner turmoil. As they descended the stairs, Lillian felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this new life, with all its complexities, could also hold moments of joy. Yet, she remained acutely aware of the delicate threads that held her family together, threads woven with secrets, love, and the haunting specter of unspoken truths. And so, as they joined Harold in the living room, Lillian steeled herself for the day ahead. With each passing moment, she felt the duality of her existence, a life filled with laughter and warmth, yet shadowed by the secrets they kept. The journey was just beginning, and she knew that navigating this new world would demand every ounce of courage she possessed. Chapter 3. In the gentle embrace of a Saturday morning, the world outside stirred with the promise of adventure. Lillian awoke with the sun, its golden rays spilling into her room like liquid light. Today was a day reserved just for her and Ethan, a respite from the complexities that had intertwined their lives since the wedding. As she dressed, anticipation fluttered within her, an exhilarating blend of excitement and trepidation. After a quick breakfast, Lillian found Ethan waiting in the living room, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his energy palpable. "Ready for our adventure?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Absolutely," Lillian replied, her heart racing. She grabbed her own bag, filled with snacks and water, and together they stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The scent of dew-kissed grass and blooming wildflowers filled their lungs, invigorating them for the day ahead. The trail they chose was a local favorite, winding through lush forests and alongside a babbling brook. As they walked, the canopy of trees above created a tapestry of shadows and light, a perfect backdrop for the blossoming connection between them. "Did you know," Ethan began, his voice teasingly serious, "that if you listen closely, you can hear the trees whispering secrets?" He leaned closer, conspiratorially, as if sharing a grand revelation. Lillian chuckled, the sound light and carefree. "What kind of secrets do they tell?" "They tell tales of ancient times, of knights and dragons, of lost love and forgotten dreams." He gestured dramatically, his arms wide, as if he were painting the very scene he described. "And they speak of two brave adventurers who seek the truth of the forest." "Adventurers, huh?" Lillian echoed, her smile widening. "And what is our quest, dear knight?" "To find the legendary hidden waterfall," he replied, puffing out his chest. "Legend has it that those who find it will have their wishes granted." "Then let's make a wish," she exclaimed, caught up in the whimsy of the moment. She felt buoyed by the simplicity of their banter, the laughter weaving a tapestry of camaraderie that began to erase the boundaries of their complicated lives. Their affectations of their love. As they ventured deeper into the woods, they shared stories of their childhoods, Ethan's tales of mischievous pranks, and Lillian's recollections of quiet afternoons spent with her books. The more they talked, the more their bond deepened, as if they were stitching together the fabric of their lives with threads of shared experience. "Hey, I have an idea," Ethan said suddenly, stopping in his tracks. "Let's each make a wish right here, right now, and see if it comes true by the end of the day." Lillian raised an eyebrow, amused. "All right, I'll play along, but how do we ensure it comes true?" "Simple. We'll write our wishes on these leaves," he suggested, plucking a vibrant green leaf from a nearby tree. "Then we'll toss them into the brook, and as they float away, our wishes will be carried off to the universe." She laughed, charmed by his enthusiasm. "Okay, but I'm warning you, my wish is going to be much better than yours." "Is that so?" Ethan challenged, grinning. "Let's see what you come up with." Seated on a soft patch of moss, they each took a moment to ponder their wishes, the forest around them humming with life. Lillian's mind raced. She could wish for anything. A perfect day, a deeper connection with Ethan, or perhaps something more profound. Yet, in the back of her mind, the weight of their secret lingered like an uninvited guest. "Ready?" Ethan broke her reverie, holding up his leaf with a flourish. "Ready?" she echoed, her heart pounding as she inscribed her wish in delicate script. "On 3, then 2, 3. They tossed their leaves into the bubbling brook, watching as they danced away, carried by the current. For a brief moment, Lillian felt a sense of liberation wash over her, as if the leaves were taking away not just their wishes, but the burdens they both carried. With the wishes cast, they resumed their hike, laughter echoing through the trees. They climbed over rocks, splashed through shallow streams, and paused to admire the vibrant wildflowers that dotted the path. Each shared glance and playful shove solidified their growing bond, a sibling-like connection that felt both comforting and dangerous. As they reached a clearing, the sound of rushing water filled the air. "We must be close," Ethan exclaimed, his excitement infectious. They hurried forward, the anticipation building with every step. And then they saw it. The waterfall cascaded down the rocks, sparkling in the sunlight like 1,000 diamonds. It was a sight so breathtaking that it stole the breath from Lillian's lungs. "Here it is, the legendary waterfall," Ethan declared, arms raised in triumph. "We did it!" Lillian stood in awe, the beauty of the scene washing over her. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," she whispered, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and longing. "You know what this means?" Ethan said, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "We have to dip our toes in. It's a rite of passage for adventurers." "All right, but only our toes," she laughed, her heart racing at the thought of splashing in the cool water. They approached the edge, where the water pooled in a serene basin. With a shared look of excitement, they kicked off their shoes, rolling up their pants, and stepped into the refreshing embrace of the water. The coolness enveloped her feet, sending a shiver up her spine, but it was exhilarating. "This is amazing," Lillian exclaimed, splashing water at Ethan playfully. "Hey, no splashing," he protested, though he was laughing, splashing back at her with abandon. Laughter filled the air as they danced around in the water, the worries of their lives forgotten in this moment of sheer bliss. As they played, Lillian felt a sense of normalcy envelop her, a fleeting escape from the complexities of their lives. For once, she could be just a girl, free and unencumbered by the weight of secrets. Here, in this moment, she felt like a sister, not a secret keeper. But as they took a moment to catch their breath, sitting at the water's edge, Lillian's heart began to tremble at the thought of what lay beneath the surface of their camaraderie. She stole a glance at Ethan, who was gazing at the waterfall with a look of wonder. What would happen when the day ended and they returned to the reality of their lives, shadowed by the truth that bound them? Lillian, he broke the silence, turning to her, his expression serious for a moment. What do you think our wishes were? I think mine was for a day just like this, she replied, her voice soft. A day where we could be free. He nodded, understanding glimmering in his eyes. And mine was for the same, a day to forget everything else. His gaze lingered on hers, a silent understanding passing between them, a moment where their bond felt unbreakable. But as they looked at one another, the silence stretched, and Lillian's heart raced. She could feel the shift in the air, the unspoken words hanging like the mist over the water. How easy it was to slip into the comfort of their connection, yet how precarious it felt, teetering on the edge of something more. Just then, a sudden splash interrupted their moment. A playful fish jumped from the water, causing them both to laugh and break the tension. They resumed their playful banter, but Lillian couldn't shake the thought of her wish, nor the weight of the secret that lay between them. As the sun began to dip in the sky, casting a warm glow over the landscape, they reluctantly decided to head back. As the sun began to dip in the sky, it felt increasingly different, as something deeper beginning to blur. Back at the house, the evening settled in, wrapping the world in a comforting shroud of twilight. As they entered, the familiar sounds of Harold's laughter and Marissa's soft voice welcomed them. Lillian felt a pang of longing. How she wished to carry the joy of the waterfall into her home, to share it with her mother, to let her in on the happiness she had found. But as she stepped into the living room, the reality of their lives settled back onto her shoulders. The laughter echoed, but it felt distant, as if she were observing from the outside. She exchanged glances with Ethan, a shared understanding passing between them, a reminder of the secret they carried, a bond forged in both joy and complexity. Later that evening, Lillian lay in bed, her mind racing with thoughts of the day. The laughter, the connection, the fleeting moments of freedom, it all felt like a dream, beautiful, yet fragile. She knew that tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own reminders of the truth that loomed over them. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a silent wish to the stars outside her window, a hope that somehow, amidst the chaos and the secrets, she and Ethan could find a way to navigate the complexities of their hearts, a way to embrace the bond they shared, no matter how tangled it might become. And with that she drifted into a restless sleep, her dreams filled with the laughter of waterfalls and the warmth of summer days, the secrets they kept intertwining with the hopes they dared to form. Chapter 4. The week following their splendid adventure to the waterfall unfolded with an odd mixture of normalcy and tension. Lillian found herself trapped in a delicate dance, oscillating between the joy of her burgeoning friendship with Ethan and the gnawing unease of the secret that loomed over her family. Each day felt like a page torn from a novel, its narrative incomplete, as if she were living in the margins of someone else's story. It was a Thursday afternoon when the simmering tension finally boiled over. Lillian, nestled in the warm embrace of her favorite armchair, was lost in the pages of a book. The comforting scent of vanilla candles filled the room, mingling with the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. Yet, her concentration wavered, her thoughts drifting to the moments shared with Ethan, the laughter, the shared wishes, and the unspoken bond that had begun to flourish between them. Suddenly, the sound of raised voices broke the tranquility. Lillian's heart raced as she set her book down, straining to catch the muffled words drifting from the kitchen. It was her mother, Marissa, and Harold, engaged in what sounded like a heated discussion. Curiosity piqued, she tiptoed toward the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't understand why you think this is necessary." Harold's voice was firm, yet tinged with an undercurrent of concern. "And I don't understand why you can't see it," Marissa retorted, her tone sharp. "Lillian deserves to know the truth, Harold. She has the right to understand her own life." Lillian's breath hitched in her throat. The truth? What truth? The unspoken question lingered like a specter, casting shadows over her mind. She pressed herself against the wall, heart racing, straining to hear more. "Do you really think revealing everything will help her?" Harold's voice softened, as if he were trying to hold back a tide of emotions. "What if it only complicates things further? You know how sensitive she is." "Sensitive, yes, but she's also strong, Harold," Marissa replied, her voice resolute. "Hiding the truth will only breed more secrets. I refuse to let her live in ignorance any longer. She deserves clarity." Lillian's head spun. Clarity? Was she living in a fog of lies? The weight of their conversation pressed down on her like an anvil, making it difficult to breathe. She felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting, and she was powerless to stop it. "Marissa, please," Harold pleaded. "You must consider the consequences. If we tell her everything, it could shatter her. Or it could set her free." Marissa's voice rose, filled with an impassioned fervor that startled Lillian. "The truth has a way of unraveling knots we never knew bound us. She's old enough to understand. We cannot shield her from reality forever." Silence filled the air, heavy and oppressive. Lillian's heart raced as she contemplated what her mother might be hiding. Hadn't she always sensed that something lay beneath the surface? The way her mother's eyes clouded over at certain questions, the way she deflected discussions about their past. The fabric of her life felt woven with secrets, and now the very thread was beginning to unravel. Suddenly the kitchen door swung open and Lillian stumbled back, her heart in her throat. Marissa stepped out, her face a mask of concern that morphed into surprise upon seeing her daughter. "Lillian, I didn't know you were there." "Mom, what were you talking about?" Lillian's voice trembled, a mixture of fear and determination propelling her forward. "What truth?" Marissa's expression shifted, the warmth in her eyes replaced by a flicker of something darker. "It's nothing, sweetheart, just an adult conversation," she replied. But the way she avoided Lillian's gaze told a different story. "Don't lie to me!" Lillian's voice rose, fueled by a sudden surge of defiance. "I overheard you. You said I deserved to know the truth. What truth? What are you hiding from me?" Marissa hesitated, her face pale and drawn. "Lillian, please. It's complicated. I just want to protect you." "Protect me from what? The truth?" Lillian's heart raced. "I can handle it. Just tell me." For a moment, silence hung between them, a fragile tension that felt like a taut string ready to snap. Marissa took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "This isn't easy for me, my love. I thought I could shield you from the complexities of our lives, but perhaps you're right. Perhaps you deserve to know." The gravity of her mother's words settled over Lillian like a heavy cloak, and she felt her heart race with a mix of hope and dread. "What is it?" she pressed, her voice softer now, filled with an urgency that demanded answers. Marissa motioned for her to sit. "Let's talk in the living room," she said, leading Lillian away from the heavy atmosphere of the kitchen. The air felt charged with anticipation, and Lillian could barely contain the tumult of emotions swirling within her. Once settled on the couch, Marissa took a moment to gather her thoughts, visibly trembling as she began. "Lillian, what I'm about to tell you is not easy. It concerns your father and the decisions I made after he left." Lillian felt a pang in her chest at the mention of her father. Memories of fragmented conversations and whispered regrets flooded back. "What about him?" she asked, her voice small. "Your father and we didn't part on good terms. There were things I kept from you, reasons for our separation that I thought would shield you from pain," Marissa said, her voice cracking. "When I met Harold, I believed I could create a new life for us, a life free from the shadows of the past." "What didn't you ever tell me?" Lillian asked, her heart aching. "I've always felt like there was something you weren't sharing. Was it so bad that you had to hide it?" "I thought it was for the best," Marissa replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want you to see the darkness that sometimes clouds love. I wanted to protect your heart." "But I want to know," Lillian exclaimed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I can't live in this fog anymore. What if understanding the truth could help me? What if it could help us?" Marissa fell silent, her gaze fixed on the floor as she wrestled with her emotions. "Lillian, your father, he had his demons. It wasn't just about love. There were choices he made that affected our family deeply. Choices I thought I could shield you from." "What choices?" Lillian pressed, her heart pounding. Was he a bad person?" No, it's not that simple," Marissa said, her tone urgent. "Your father loved you dearly, more than anything, but he struggled with his own issues, addictions, a past that haunted him. I believed that by keeping these truths from you, I could protect you from the pain." Lillian sat back, her mind racing. The pieces began to fit together in a way that felt both illuminating and devastating. And Harold? Did he know? Harold knew some, but not all. I wanted to create a new beginning for us, one that didn't carry the weight of my past. I thought I could build a life free from those shadows, Marissa confessed, her voice trembling. As the weight of her mother's confession settled over her, Lillian felt a tumult of emotions stirring within her. "And what about Ethan?" she whispered, the name escaping her lips unbidden. "What does he have to do with all this?" Marissa's expression shifted, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. "Ethan is a good boy. He cares for you. And I didn't want to complicate things with the past, but you must understand, the truth has a way of entangling lives in ways we cannot foresee." "Entangling lives?" Lillian echoed, her heart aching. "Mom, I care for Ethan. I thought we were building something special, but now I feel like everything is unraveling." Marissa reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it over Lillian's. "I never wanted to hurt you, darling, but the truth is a double-edged sword. It can bring clarity, but it can also wound deeply." As Lillian absorbed her mother's words, she felt the gravity of her situation. Their family was built on a foundation of secrets, and now the very truth that was meant to set her free felt like a weight she could scarcely bear. She was caught in a web of conflicting emotions, love for her mother, burgeoning feelings for Ethan, and the haunting specter of her father's past. "Mom, I need time to think," Lillian said finally, her heart heavy. "I can't process all of this at once." "I understand," Marissa replied, her voice thick with emotion. Just remember, my love, that the truth is a powerful force. It can heal, but it can also divide. No matter how painful, it's important we face it together. As Lillian nodded, she felt a surge of gratitude for her mother's honesty, even amidst the turmoil. But as she retreated to her room, the weight of the world settled on her shoulders. The truth was a fickle companion, and now she was left to navigate its treacherous waters alone. That night, as she lay in bed, the shadows danced on the walls, whispering secrets of their own. Lillian's mind raced with thoughts of her father, the choices that had shaped her mother's life, and the implications for her own heart. The bond with Ethan, once a source of joy, now felt fraught with uncertainty. She turned to the window, staring into the night, searching for answers among the stars. Would the truth ultimately set her free, or would it bind her in ways she could not yet comprehend? As sleep eluded her, Lillian found herself cradled in the arms of an uncomfortable realization. Her life was a tapestry woven with love and loss, and the threads of truth would demand to be unraveled, no matter the cost. And as the dawn approached, she knew that no matter how painful, she would face the truth, for in its depths lay the potential for her own freedom, a freedom she so desperately sought. Chapter 5. The sun rose gently over the horizon, casting a warm light that filtered through the leaves, painting the garden in hues of gold and green. Lillian stood by the window, her heart a tumultuous sea of emotions. After the revelation of her mother's secrets, the weight of uncertainty hung heavy upon her, yet the world outside seemed blissfully unaware of her inner turmoil. The day progressed slowly, each tick of the clock echoing in her mind. Lillian had spent the morning lost in thought, the echoes of her mother's confessions replaying in her mind like a haunting melody. She understood now that the veil of secrecy that shrouded her family was not merely a product of her mother's desire to protect her, but a complex tapestry woven from love, fear, and choice. As the afternoon light began to wane, a sudden knock at the door jolted her from her reverie. It was Ethan, standing there with a bright smile and a glint of mischief in his eyes, holding an envelope in one hand. "Lillian, you won't believe what I have for you," he exclaimed, his voice bubbling with excitement. "What is it?" she asked, a tentative smile breaking through her somber thoughts. Ethan stepped inside, his presence instantly lifting the atmosphere. "An invitation." He waved the envelope playfully. "We're having a family gathering this Saturday at the old Whitmore estate. You have to come. It'll be fun. Food, games, and everyone will be there." Lillian's heart sank momentarily. A family gathering meant being surrounded by relatives, all of whom would expect her to play the part of the dutiful stepdaughter, the one who fit seamlessly into the fabric of their lives. "Is it really a good idea for me to be there?" she murmured, the weight of her mother's recent words pressing heavily on her. "Of course! It's the perfect opportunity for you to get to know everyone better," Ethan insisted, his enthusiasm infectious. "And besides, I want to show you off. Everyone's been curious about you since Mom and Harold got married. This is your chance to shine." Lillian felt a flutter of nerves at the thought of the gathering. She had grown closer to Ethan in the past weeks, their bond deepening in a way that felt both exhilarating and frightening. But the idea of being the center of attention, of maintaining the facade of a happy family, filled her with dread. What if they ask about my past? About my father? Lillian's voice faltered, her vulnerability laid bare. Ethan's expression softened, and he stepped closer. "Then you tell them the truth as you see it. No one is expecting a grand performance. Just be yourself. Besides, "I'll be right there with you," he reassured her. "We'll face them together." His words wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, and for a brief moment, Lillian felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this gathering could be a turning point, a chance to forge a new path in her life, one where she was no longer defined by the secrets of her past. "Okay," she finally said, her voice steadying. "I'll go, but only if you promise to stay by my side the entire time." "Damn," Ethan said, grinning widely. "It's going to be amazing, I promise." As he left, Lillian found herself smiling, excitement mingling with anxiety. The prospect of the gathering began to take root in her mind, and she started to envision the possibilities. Perhaps she could navigate this new family dynamic. Perhaps she could be more than just a shadow in a house filled with secrets. Yet, even as she prepared for the gathering, the weight of her newfound knowledge lingered. The truth of her father's past and her mother's attempts to shield her from it loomed over her, casting a shadow she could not shake. The gathering would be a test, not just of her ability to fit in, but of her resolve to confront the tangled threads of her life. Saturday arrived, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of blooming flowers. Lillian stood before the mirror, adjusting her hair and smoothing the fabric of her dress. She felt like a stranger in her own skin, the reflection staring back at her both familiar and foreign. Today, she would don the mask of the perfect daughter, the one who smiled and laughed, all while grappling with the storm brewing within. As they drove to the Whitmore estate, the tension in the car was palpable. Ethan chatted animatedly, recounting stories of past gatherings, but Lillian's mind was elsewhere, lost in the maze of her thoughts. The grand estate loomed ahead, its majestic facade both inviting and intimidating, a fortress of memories waiting to be unearthed. Upon arrival, Lillian was greeted by a chorus of voices and laughter, the sound echoing through the sprawling garden. The estate was alive with activity. Children played tag, adults mingled with glasses of wine in hand, and the air was filled with the tantalizing aroma of grilled meats and fresh pastries. "Come on," Ethan urged, taking her hand and leading her into the throng of people. "Let's find Mom and Harold." As they navigated through the crowd, Lillian felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. She forced a smile, exchanging pleasantries with distant relatives, but inside, her heart raced. Each introduction felt like a trial, a test of her ability to maintain the facade of normalcy. "Lillian, there you are!" Marissa's voice broke through the noise, and Lillian turned to see her mother approaching, a radiant smile on her face. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Thanks for inviting me, Mom," Lillian replied, trying to infuse sincerity into her words. Marissa beamed, her eyes sparkling with pride as she introduced Lillian to various relatives. "This is Aunt Clara and her son Peter. He's just back from college." The introductions flowed seamlessly, yet Lillian felt as if she were floating outside of her own body, watching the performance unfold. As the afternoon wore on, Lillian did her best to engage in conversations, but her mind remained preoccupied with the shadows of her past. The laughter around her felt like a distant echo, a reminder of the joy she yearned for, but could not fully embrace. Ethan, ever attentive, seemed to sense her unease. "Hey, why don't we take a break?" he suggested, leading her away from the crowd and into a quieter corner of the garden, where the flowers bloomed vibrantly under the sun. "Thanks, I needed that," Lillian said, grateful for the reprieve. "It's just, a lot, you know?" "I get it," Ethan replied, leaning casually against a tree. "But I'm glad you're here. It's nice to have you in the family, even if it's just for a day." His words warmed her heart, and for a moment the weight of her worries lifted. "I'm glad to be here too," she said, her voice softening. "It's just hard to pretend everything is fine when I know it's not." Ethan's expression turned serious. "You don't have to pretend with me, Lillian. I'm here for you, always." Their eyes met, and a shared understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the complexities that bound them together. In that moment, Lillian felt a flicker of hope, a belief that perhaps their bond could withstand the trials they faced. As they returned to the gathering, laughter and music filled the air. Lillian felt herself drawn into the warmth of the festivities, the music beckoning her to join in. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her onto the dance floor, where couples swayed to the rhythm of a lively tune. The music enveloped them, and as they moved together, Lillian felt a surge of joy. The worries that had plagued her mind began to fade, replaced by the exhilaration of the moment. With Ethan by her side, she could almost forget the secrets that threatened to unravel her world. But as the dance came to an end, the reality of her situation crashed back in. Surrounded by the smiling faces of her family, Lillian felt an overwhelming urge to step back, to distance herself from the facade that she had so carefully constructed. The laughter felt hollow, the smiles painted on, as if the very air was filled with unspoken truths. "Let's grab something to eat," Ethan suggested, sensing her retreat. They moved toward the buffet table, where an array of delectable treats awaited them. As they filled their plates, Lillian caught sight of her mother across the garden, deep in conversation with Harold. Marissa's expression was animated, her laughter bright, yet Lillian felt a pang of disconnection. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, noticing her gaze. "Yeah, I wish I could shake this feeling," Lillian admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like I'm here, but I'm not really here." Ethan nodded, a look of understanding in his eyes. "You're still adjusting, and that's okay. Just remember you're not alone in this." As they sat on a bench, enjoying the food in the warmth of the sun, Lillian felt a sense of calm wash over her. Perhaps this gathering was not merely a test, but a chance to forge new connections, to redefine her place within this family. But as the evening wore on, the shadows began to creep back in. Lillian found herself watching families interact, the ease with which they shared laughter and stories, highlighting her own feelings of isolation. The truth of her father's past loomed over her, a specter she could not escape, even in the midst of joy. Just then, a distant voice called out, breaking her reverie. "Lillian, come join us for the games." It was her cousin Sarah, waving enthusiastically. "Come on, we can't leave them hanging," Ethan urged, taking her hand and leading her toward the gathering. As they approached, Lillian felt her heart race. The game involved a series of challenges, each designed to elicit laughter and camaraderie. She joined in, laughter bubbling forth as she participated, but the weight of her secret remained a constant companion. The final challenge involved a silly storytelling game, where each participant added a line to create a ludicrous narrative. Lillian found herself swept up in the antics, her laughter genuine, but with each turn, the game took a bizarre twist that felt strangely reflective of her own life, each addition a reminder of the tangled web of secrets they all inhabited. Finally, it was Ethan's turn. He stood, his eyes sparkling with mischief. And then, the brave knight, having defeated the dragon, turned to the princess and declared, Wait, Lillian interrupted, feeling a surge of inspiration, but the princess had a secret of her own. She was actually a dragon in disguise. Laughter erupted around them, and for a moment Lillian felt a sense of belonging, an acceptance that soothed the edges of her anxiety. As the game continued, the simple joy of the moment enveloped her, and she realized that perhaps the truth could coexist with happiness. As the evening drew to a close, the sky transformed into a canvas of stars, twinkling above like 1,000 watchful eyes. Lillian stood with Ethan by the edge of the garden, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. Tonight was surprisingly fun, she admitted, her heart lighter than it had been all day. Ethan grinned, leaning against the railing. I told you, you're part of this family now, and they love you for you, not for the secrets. Lillian looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you for being my anchor today. I don't know what I would have done without you. Always, he replied softly, their eyes locking in a moment that felt charged with unspoken words. But even as she reveled in the warmth of their connection, the shadows of her mother's confessions lingered in the corners of her mind. The truth would eventually come to light, and Lillian knew she could not hide from it forever. As they made their way home under the blanket of stars, Lillian felt a strange sense of resolve. Perhaps it was time to confront the truth, to weave her own narrative amidst the tangled threads of her family's history. The gathering had shown her that joy could exist even alongside pain, and she was determined to embrace both in her journey forward. And so, as the car rolled down the familiar streets, Lillian steeled herself for the days to come, knowing that the path ahead would not be easy, but it was hers to navigate. With Ethan by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that she could unravel the secrets of her past, while forging a new future filled with honesty and connection. Chapter 6. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the garden, where the vibrant blooms seemed to whisper secrets of their own. Lillian stood by the window, her heart in turmoil, contemplating the rapidly encroaching family gathering. Anxiety fluttered in her chest like a caged bird, desperate to break free. The invitation from Ethan had kindled a spark of excitement, but now that spark was overshadowed by the weight of her mother's revelations. As the day of the gathering approached, Lillian found herself caught in a web of conflicting emotions. The bond she shared with Ethan had taken on new dimensions, yet now it felt precarious, as though the very foundation of their relationship was threatened by the secrets that loomed in the background. She was not merely a stepdaughter attending a family event. She was a reluctant actor in a play where the script was dictated by the past. The gathering was to be held at the Whitmore estate, a grand old house that had seen generations come and go, its walls steeped in history. Lillian had heard tales of its opulence, but she had never set foot inside. The thought of mingling with relatives, many of whom she barely knew, filled her with trepidation. What would they ask? What would they think of her? And most importantly, how could she maintain the facade of a happy family when her heart was so discordant? Ethan arrived the evening before the event, exuberant and full of life. He bounded into the house, his energy infectious. "Tomorrow's going to be amazing. I can't wait for you to meet everyone," he declared, his eyes shining with anticipation. Lillian managed to smile, though inside she felt as though she were teetering on the edge of a precipice. "I hope I can keep up with all the excitement," she replied, her voice laced with uncertainty. Ethan's expression turned serious for a moment. "You'll do great. Just be yourself. Trust me, they'll love you." He stepped closer, his presence a comforting balm against her rising anxiety. "And remember, I'll be right there with you." Ethan's expression turned serious for a moment. "You'll do great. Just be yourself. Trust me, they'll love you." He stepped closer, his presence a comforting balm against her rising anxiety. And remember, I'll be right there with you." As they prepared for bed that night, Lillian's mind raced. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing in the dim light like specters of her fears. How could she be herself when she felt so fragmented? The truth about her family weighed heavily upon her, pressing down like a weight she could not shake. The next day dawned bright and clear, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. Lillian dressed carefully, choosing a soft blue dress that complemented her eyes, hoping it might provide her with some semblance of confidence. She glanced at her reflection, searching for the girl who had once felt so sure of herself. Instead, she saw a stranger, one who was caught between the past and an uncertain future. As they drove to the Whitmore estate, the scenery blurred outside the window, a kaleidoscope of colors that matched her tumultuous thoughts. Ethan chatted animatedly beside her, recounting anecdotes about his family, but Lillian struggled to focus, her mind drifting to the truths she carried like a hidden burden. Upon their arrival, the estate loomed before them, a magnificent structure that seemed to breathe history. Lillian stepped out of the car, her heart pounding as she took in the grandeur of the place. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. The laughter and chatter of guests filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. Ethan took her hand, guiding her through the throngs of people. "There's my mom," he shouted, waving enthusiastically at a woman who was chatting with a group of guests. Lillian felt a rush of warmth at the sight of Harold's wife, a woman with an inviting smile and a warmth that seemed to radiate. "Lillian," Marissa called, her eyes lighting up as she approached. "I'm so glad you could make it. Everyone's been looking forward to meeting you." "Thank you for inviting me," Lillian replied, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. She felt the weight of many eyes upon her as introductions were made, each handshake and smile a reminder of her role in this family she was still trying to understand. As the afternoon wore on, Lillian found herself engaging in conversations, her nerves gradually easing. She laughed at stories shared, fumbled through discussions about shared interests, and even found herself enjoying the light-hearted banter. Yet, beneath the surface, a current of anxiety flowed, threatening to pull her under. In a quieter moment, as she wandered through the expansive gardens, Lillian caught sight of Ethan talking to a group of relatives, his laughter ringing out like music. A smile broke across her face, but it quickly faded when she overheard snippets of conversation. "Lillian seems lovely, but I wonder how she fits in," one of the aunts remarked, her voice laced with curiosity. "It must be hard for her, coming into a family with such a history." Another voice chimed in, "I hear she doesn't talk much about her past. I wonder what secrets she's keeping." Lillian's heart sank. Each word felt like a dagger, piercing through the fragile armor she had constructed around herself. How could they not see her for who she was, but rather as a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit? She turned away, the laughter of the gathering fading into a distant echo. Feeling overwhelmed, Lillian sought refuge in a secluded corner of the garden, where the foliage provided a cocoon of privacy. She leaned against a cool stone wall, taking deep breaths as she tried to steady her racing heart. Just as she began to gather her thoughts, she felt a presence beside her. "Hey, there you are," Ethan said softly, concern etched across his face. "I was looking for you. You disappeared." "I just needed a moment," Lillian admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a bit overwhelming, don't you think?" Ethan nodded, his expression turning serious. "Yeah, I get that. But you're doing great. Everyone's really excited to have you here." "Are they?" Lillian asked, her eyes searching his for reassurance. "Or are they just curious? I can't shake the feeling that I'm an outsider." Ethan stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You belong here, Lillian. You may not have the same history, but you're part of this family now, and I'm not going to let anyone make you feel otherwise." His words warmed her heart, yet a flicker of doubt remained. "But what if they find out? About my past, about my father? What if it all comes crashing down?" Ethan reached for her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll handle it together. I promise. Just focus on enjoying the moment." As they stood there, Lillian felt the tension within her begin to ease. Perhaps she could embrace this moment, if only for a little while. With Ethan by her side, she felt a flicker of hope, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could find her place in this new world. The evening wore on, and the gathering transformed into a lively celebration. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the scent of delicious food wafting from the grand dining hall. Lillian found herself swept into conversations, sharing stories and laughter as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the estate. But as the night deepened, the cracks in her facade began to widen. Lillian caught snippets of conversations that pierced her heart, whispers that echoed the insecurities she tried so hard to suppress. "She seems nice, but can she really fit in? I wonder if she's hiding something." The whispers followed her like shadows, and, with each passing moment, the weight of her secret bore down upon her. She could feel the tension building within her, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. The facade she had tried so hard to maintain began to crumble, brick by brick. Finally, as the clock struck 9, Lillian found herself standing alone on the balcony, the cool night air a balm against her heated cheeks. She gazed out at the stars, their twinkling lights a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. The laughter from the gathering echoed behind her, but all she could feel was isolation. "Lillian?" A soft voice broke through her reverie. It was Ethan, his eyes searching hers. Are you okay?" "No," she admitted, a sob rising in her throat. "I can't do this. I feel like I'm drowning in expectations and secrets." Ethan stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her. "You're not alone. Just breathe. We'll get through this together." In that moment, as Lillian surrendered to the comfort of his embrace, she realized that the cracks had begun to show not just in her facade, but in her heart as well. She was torn between the loyalty she felt toward her mother and the burgeoning feelings for Ethan, emotions that defied the very boundaries she had tried to erect. As they stood together, the weight of their unspoken truths hung heavy in the air. Lillian knew that the gathering had been a test, one that had revealed the first cracks in her carefully constructed world. The truth, it seemed, was not just a hidden past. It was a complex tapestry of love, loyalty, and the struggle to find oneself amidst the chaos. And as they lingered there in the moonlight, Lillian felt a stirring within her, a desire to confront the shadows of her past and to embrace the future that lay ahead, no matter how uncertain it might be. Chapter 7. As autumn deepened, the days grew shorter, and the air turned crisp with the whisper of winter's approach. Lillian found herself ensnared in a tempest of emotions, each feeling crashing over her like relentless waves against a rocky shore. The family gathering had offered her a glimpse of what life could be, yet it had also illuminated the chasms that lay hidden beneath the surface of her heart. The warmth of Ethan's laughter still echoed in her ears, a melody that played on a loop in her mind. Yet, intertwined with that joy was an unsettling truth she could no longer ignore. Her feelings for him had morphed into something far more profound than the innocent affection of a sister for her brother. It was a love that defied the very fabric of their relationship, a tangled web of desire and loyalty that left her bewildered. The morning sun filtered through her window, casting a golden glow on the familiar surroundings of her room, yet everything felt altered, as if she were seeing the world through a distorted lens. Lillian sat at her desk, a blank page before her, her pen poised but unmoving. Words eluded her, just as clarity had become an elusive specter since that day at the Whitmore estate. Her shoulders. She rose, pacing the room, her thoughts spiraling. How could she feel this way about Ethan? The very thoughts sent shivers down her spine. He was her stepbrother, the boy who had become her confidant, her protector, a friend who had shared glances and solace. Yet with every shared glance, every brush of their hands, the line between affection and something deeper had blurred until it was nearly indistinguishable. Lillian collapsed onto her bed, burying her face in the soft pillows that bore witness to her turmoil. She recalled the way Ethan had looked at her that night, his eyes filled with a warmth that sparked something deep within her. The memory of his embrace, the safety, the comfort, had ignited a flame she could not extinguish. She sighed, a mix of longing and despair, wishing she could confide in someone, anyone, about the chaos within her. But who could she tell? Her mother had woven a tapestry of lies to protect her, and the very thought of unraveling that fabric filled Lillian with dread. The secrets piled high, a mountain she felt too small to scale, and yet the truth loomed larger than her fears, demanding recognition. She needed to talk to Ethan, to lay bare the feelings that had taken root in her heart. But what would that conversation entail? Would it shatter the bond they had built, or would it strengthen it in ways she could not yet foresee? The thought of risking their relationship terrified her, yet the weight of her silence was becoming unbearable. That evening, Lillian found herself wandering through the garden, the cool air a balm against her restless spirit. The leaves danced in the soft breeze, their colors a riot of gold and crimson, yet she felt none of the joy that nature usually inspired in her. Instead, she was acutely aware of the distance between herself and the vibrant world around her. As she meandered down the path, she spotted Ethan sitting on a bench, sketchbook in hand, lost in a world of his own creation. His brow was furrowed in concentration, the way it always was when he was absorbed in his art. Lillian's heart tugged at the sight of him, a familiar ache that twisted with longing. "Hey," she called softly, breaking the silence that enveloped them. Ethan looked up, his expression lighting up with a smile that sent a rush of warmth through her. "Lillian, come here!" He gestured for her to join him, and she felt an involuntary smile tug at her lips as she approached. "What are you working on?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light, even as her heart raced. "Just some sketches of the garden. It's beautiful this time of year, don't you think?" he replied, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Lillian peered at the page, filled with delicate lines that captured the essence of the autumn blooms. "You have such a talent," she said, admiration lacing her voice. "You really bring the beauty to life." "Thanks," he said, a hint of shyness creeping into his demeanor. "I wish I could capture everything I see in my head. Sometimes it feels like I can't quite translate it onto the page." "You do a wonderful job," she assured him, though her thoughts were miles away, tangled in the web of her emotions. She took a deep breath, summoning the courage that had eluded her all day. "Ethan, can we talk about something?" "Of course. What's on your mind?" His gaze turned serious, the playful light fading as he sensed the shift in her mood. Lillian hesitated, the words battling within her, but she knew she could not keep pretending. "It's about us, about how I feel." Ethan's expression shifted, curiosity mingling with concern. "What do you mean?" "Things have changed for me, Ethan. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel differently about you than I should," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. A moment of silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Ethan's brow furrowed, and Lillian's heart raced as she awaited his response. She could see the gears turning in his mind, the realization dawning in his eyes. "Lillian, he started, but she quickly interrupted, the words spilling forth before she could stop them. "I know we're family now, and I shouldn't feel this way, but I can't help it, Ethan. You mean so much to me, and I don't want to ruin what we have, but I also can't ignore how I feel." His gaze softened, and for a moment, Lillian thought she saw a flicker of understanding in his expression. "You're not ruining anything by being honest," he replied, his voice steady. "I've felt something too, but I didn't know how to say it." Her heart leaped at his words, a mix of hope and fear swirling within her. "You feel it too? But we can't. It's complicated." "Life is complicated," Ethan said, leaning closer, his expression earnest. "I care about you, Lillian. More than I should, perhaps, but that doesn't change how I feel." The vulnerability in his words resonated deeply within her. Here they were, two souls entwined in a situation that defied convention, yet the connection they shared felt undeniable. Lillian's heart raced, a blend of exhilaration and trepidation coursing through her. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan took a breath, the weight of the moment hanging heavily between them. "I don't know, but I think we need to figure it out together. We can't let fear dictate our feelings." As they sat in the twilight, the world around them fading into shadows, Lillian felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. Perhaps they could navigate this complicated path together. Perhaps love, in its most unexpected form, could lead them to a place of understanding and acceptance. But as she leaned closer to Ethan, a familiar unease crept back in. What would her mother say? What would happen if the truth came crashing down? The weight of the secret they both carried felt heavier than ever, a reminder of the fragile balance they were attempting to maintain. The evening air turned chillier, and Lillian shivered slightly. Ethan noticed and pulled his sweater off, draping it around her shoulders. "Here, take this," he said, his voice softening. The warmth of the fabric enveloped her, and she felt a sense of safety that momentarily quelled her fears. "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping the sweater tightly around her, as if it could shield her from the turmoil within. Ethan's eyes searched hers, and in that moment, Lillian realized the depth of their connection. They were standing at a crossroads, and the path they chose could lead them to either joy or heartache. The uncertainty loomed, a specter that threatened to overshadow the budding hope they shared. "Lillian," he said softly, "no matter what happens, I want you to know that I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together, even if it's difficult." This sincerity washed over her like a gentle tide, and for the first time in days she felt a glimmer of peace amidst the chaos. Perhaps love, complicated, messy, and fraught with challenges, could still be a guiding light through the shadows. As they lingered in the garden, the stars began to twinkle above them, each one a beacon of possibility. Lillian took a deep breath, the crisp air filling her lungs, and she felt a sense of clarity dawn within her. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer alone in her journey. In that moment, as she sat beside Ethan, she understood that the heart's desire often defies the constraints of circumstance. Together, they would navigate the complexities of their emotions, forging a bond that transcended the boundaries of family and loyalty. And as the night deepened, Lillian felt the first stirrings of courage awaken within her, a readiness to embrace the truth of her feelings no matter where the journey might lead. Chapter 8. The chill of autumn deepened, wrapping the world in a cloak of golden hues, and a bittersweet nostalgia that seemed to hang in the air like the scent of fallen leaves. Lillian found herself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, each day bringing her closer to a reckoning she both yearned for and dreaded. The bond she shared with Ethan had flourished, yet it now bore the weight of an unspoken truth that threatened to unravel everything. It was a quiet evening, the sun setting behind the horizon, casting a warm glow through the window of the cozy sitting room where Lillian sat with her thoughts. She traced the rim of her teacup, lost in the reverie of their recent conversations, the way Ethan's laughter danced in her memory like a haunting melody. She had never felt so understood, so seen, and yet the very essence of that connection now felt perilous. On this particular night, as the shadows lengthened and the world outside dimmed, Lillian heard the familiar sound of Ethan's footsteps approaching. Her heart quickened in response, a rhythm that echoed the tumult within her. They had shared so much in recent weeks, late-night talks under the stars, stolen glances across crowded rooms, and the comfort of shared silences. But tonight, there was an electricity in the air, a tension that promised something monumental. "Lillian?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts, warm and inviting. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, a hesitant smile playing at the corners of his lips. The sight of him, framed by the soft light of the room, took her breath away. "Hey, Ethan, what's up?" she replied, attempting to sound casual, though her heart was racing. "I was wondering if you'd like to take a walk with me. There's something I want to show you," he said, his expression serious yet laced with excitement. Curiosity piqued, Lillian nodded. "Sure, let's go." She rose, feeling both anticipation and a hint of dread. What could he possibly want to show her? The air felt thick with unspoken words as they stepped outside into the cool evening. The garden was a tapestry of shadows and flickering lights from the nearby house, the rustling leaves whispering secrets as they walked side by side. Lillian's mind raced, contemplating the possibilities of what Ethan might reveal. Was he going to confess his feelings? Or perhaps he had been reflecting on their relationship, and she would finally have to confront the reality of her emotions. As they strolled deeper into the garden, Ethan led her to a secluded alcove, a hidden nook adorned with ivy and illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns that hung from the branches above. It felt like a sanctuary, a space carved out of time where the outside world faded away. Lillian's heart raced, the air thick with anticipation. "Lillian," Ethan began, his voice steady yet tinged with an emotion she could not quite place. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've shared." He paused, searching her eyes as if seeking permission to continue. Her breath caught in her throat. "Ethan, I—" He held up a hand to stop her, his gaze unwavering. "Let me finish. I know things are complicated. I know the history we share and the lines we're supposed to adhere to, but what I feel for you transcends all of that. I can't ignore it any longer." Lillian's heart raced, a mix of exhilaration and anxiety swirling within her. I feel it too, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But what does that mean for us? Ethan stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing until it felt as if the world around them had fallen away. I've thought about this for weeks. I'm not asking for us to ignore our past. I'm asking for us to embrace our future. He reached into his pocket, drawing out a small velvet box that sparkled under the lantern light. Lillian gasped, her heart pounding as the reality of what was unfolding settled upon her. "Ethan, what are you doing?" With a deep breath, he knelt before her, the gesture both tender and terrifying. "Lillian, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in all that life throws at us? I can't imagine a future without you by my side." Time seemed to freeze as Lillian's world spun around her, the weight of the moment pressed down, and she felt as if she were suspended between two worlds, one where she could embrace this love without reservation, and another where the weight of her mother's secrets loomed like a dark shadow. "Ethan, she stammered, her mind racing. The proposal was both a dream and a nightmare. On one hand, the promise of a life together, a shared journey filled with love and laughter. On the other, the insurmountable barriers that reality had erected between them. The truth of their connection, the history that bound them, was a chain that felt both comforting and suffocating. "Please, just say yes," Ethan urged, his eyes filled with hope and uncertainty. "I love you, Lillian. I want to build a life with you, despite the challenges. We can face them together." Tears welled in Lillian's eyes as she grappled with the magnitude of his words. "I love you too, Ethan, but I can't just say yes without considering everything. There's so much we need to talk about." "Then let's talk," he said, rising to stand beside her, the box still clutched in his hand. "We can navigate this. I don't want you to feel trapped by our past. I want you to feel free to choose." But as she looked into Ethan's earnest eyes, Lillian felt the weight of her mother's warnings echoing in her mind. The stakes were so high, and the consequences of her decision felt insurmountable. "What if we're making a mistake?" she questioned, her voice trembling. "Lillian," he said softly, "love is risky. Every choice we make carries the potential for pain, but it also holds the promise of joy. I believe in us, in what we can create together. Don't let fear hold you back." His words struck a chord deep within her, igniting a flicker of hope amidst the turmoil. Yet the uncertainty lingered, a specter hovering just out of reach. "But if we say yes, what does that mean? For our families, for your mother, for mine?" Ethan stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "We can figure that out together. I'm willing to fight for us, to navigate the complexities of our families. Love requires courage, Lillian. Will you take that leap with me?" For a moment, Lillian stood at the precipice of possibility, her heart racing as she considered the myriad paths before her. The allure of a future filled with love and companionship beckoned, but the shadows of their past loomed large, threatening to engulf them both. "I need time," she finally said, her voice steady despite the tempest within her. "I can't rush into this without thinking it through. I want to make sure that whatever choice I make is right for both of us." Ethan's expression shifted, a mixture of understanding and disappointment crossing his features. "I can respect that. Just know that my heart is with you, no matter what you decide." He slipped the ring back into the box, the sparkle dimming beneath the velvet cover. As they stood together, the silence enveloping them, Lillian felt the weight of her decision settle heavily upon her. She could see the path stretching out before her, one that glittered with the promise of love, yet was fraught with uncertainty. In that moment, she realized that life was not merely a feeling of pride of beauty, but a process of life gripped by fear. "I'll think about it," she promised, her voice firm, "but please understand, I need to be sure." Ethan nodded, his gaze softening. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting." As they walked back through the garden, the lanterns flickering overhead, Lillian felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The proposal had opened the door to a future filled with possibilities, yet it had also laid bare the weight of the secrets they carried. The choices ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that together they could navigate the complexities of their hearts and the world around them. In the days that followed, Lillian wrestled with her emotions, each moment spent in quiet contemplation. The autumn leaves continued to fall, a reminder of the passage of time and the urgency of her decisions. She found herself drawn to the very place where Ethan had proposed, seeking solace in the beauty of the garden, the serenity offering a stark contrast to the turmoil within. But as she reflected on their love, she could not shake the feeling that the truth would soon demand its reckoning. The history that bound them, the secrets that loomed like a storm cloud overhead, threatened to eclipse the light of their burgeoning romance. Would her love for Ethan be enough to withstand the weight of their shared past? Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she felt the pull of their connection stronger than ever. The allure of a life shared with him was intoxicating, yet the fear of what lay beneath the surface was equally daunting. She was caught in a web of desire and duty, and with every passing moment, the threads tangled tighter. As the days turned into weeks, Lillian knew she must confront her mother to seek the truth about the past that had shadowed their lives. The proposal had ignited a fire within her, a desire to understand not only her own heart, but the history that had shaped her family. She could no longer live in the shadows, nor could she allow fear to dictate her choices. And so, with a resolve that surprised even herself, Lillian prepared for the conversation that would change everything. As she stood before her mother, the weight of the world upon her shoulders, she felt a sense of clarity wash over her. The moment had come to face the truth, to peel back the layers of secrecy that had defined their lives for too long. "Mom," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart, "we need to talk about Ethan and about our past." The words hung in the air, charged with the promise of revelation, as Lillian took the first step toward unearthing the secrets they had kept for so long. Chapter 9. The winds of change swept through the quaint town of Willow Creek, rustling the leaves and whispering secrets that seemed to echo Lillian's turmoil. A sense of foreboding lingered in the air, thickening the atmosphere around her as she navigated the complexities of her heart. The recent proposal from Ethan had stirred within her a maelstrom of emotions, bringing to the surface all the unspoken fears and desires she had kept hidden beneath layers of familial obligation and society expectation. In the days following that fateful evening, Lillian found herself retreating into the sanctuary of her thoughts, often wandering into the garden where she and Ethan had shared their most intimate moments. Each flower that bloomed seemed to mock her indecision, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the gray uncertainty that clouded her heart. Yet, it was in the quiet of her room, amidst the shadows of fading daylight, that she felt the weight of the impending confrontation with her mother. Her mother, Margaret, was a woman of formidable strength, her presence a blend of warmth and authority that commanded respect. Yet beneath that exterior lay a heart that had weathered its share of storms, a heart that Lillian had always sought to protect. The lie that bound them now felt like a fragile thread, one that could snap at the slightest tug, unraveling everything they had built together. It was early afternoon when Lillian finally mustered the courage to seek her mother's counsel. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the dining room where Margaret was busy arranging a bouquet of flowers. The scent of jasmine filled the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of freshly baked bread, a comforting reminder of home. But today the familiar sights and smells offered little solace as Lillian approached her mother, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mom?" Lillian's voice trembled slightly, a reflection of her anxiety. Margaret looked up, her expression softening as she set the flowers aside. "Lillian, sweetheart, what is it? You seem troubled." Taking a deep breath, Lillian sat at the table, her hands clasped tightly together. "I need to talk to you about Ethan." At the mention of his name, Margaret's expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing her features. "Ethan? What about him?" Lillian hesitated, searching for the right words. "He proposed to me." Silence enveloped the room, thick and heavy. Margaret's gaze turned distant, as if she were peering into a past that had long been buried. A proposal. That's a significant step, Lillian. Are you sure you're ready for such a commitment?" I don't know," Lillian admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love him, Mom, but there's so much we haven't discussed. Our history, the truth." Margaret's expression hardened, a flicker of fear flashing in her eyes. "You must understand, Lillian. Our family has faced enough turmoil. The truth can be a dangerous thing." The warning in her mother's voice sent a chill through Lillian. "But isn't it better to be honest, to confront what's been hidden?" Margaret sighed, a weariness settling upon her shoulders. Honesty can be a double-edged sword. It may bring clarity, but it can also destroy. You must tread carefully, my dear. "Well, can't you just tell me what you're afraid of?" Lillian pressed, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "What are you hiding from me?" The tension in the room thickened, and Margaret's eyes darkened with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "You don't understand the complexities of our situation, Lillian. There are reasons I have kept certain truths from you. Protecting you has always been my priority." "Protecting me from what?" Lillian's voice rose, the desperation evident. "From love? From the possibility of happiness? From the consequences of a love that may not be what it seems," Margaret replied, her tone edged with urgency. "Ethan is not just your stepbrother. There are layers to our family's history that could complicate your relationship in ways you cannot foresee." Lillian's heart raced, confusion and anger intertwining like a twisted vine. "What do you mean? What does our family's history have to do with Ethan?" Margaret stood, the bouquet forgotten as she paced the room, her hands wringing together as if trying to unravel a knot that refused to loosen. "You must trust me, Lillian. There are things about your father, about our past, that you have yet to learn, secrets that, if uncovered, could change everything." "What do you mean?" Lilia demanded, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't just drop hints like that and expect me to stand here in ignorance." Margaret turned to face her, her expression softening as if she were seeing her daughter for the first time. "I know this is difficult, but I cannot bear to see you hurt. The truth can be a burden, and sometimes it is better left unspoken." "But how can I make a choice about my future if I don't know the truth?" Lillian pleaded, her voice breaking. "If I love Ethan, I need to know what I'm getting into." Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a reflection of the turmoil within. "I fear that knowing the truth will only bring you pain. I've fought so hard to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" Lillian exclaimed, her voice rising in frustration. "From love? From a life that could be filled with joy?" "From the shadows of our past," her mother replied, her voice shaking. "From the legacy of secrets that could threaten us both." As the weight of Margaret's words settled in, Lillian felt the ground beneath her shift. The notion of love, of pursuing a relationship with Ethan, suddenly felt precarious, like walking on a tightrope suspended over a chasm of uncertainty. "You're not being fair, Mom. I deserve to know the truth." Margaret's expression hardened once more, her protective instinct flaring. "Lillian, you must understand, this is not just about you. Our family has endured too much already. I won't let you jeopardize what little stability we have left." "But at what cost?" Lillian countered, desperation creeping into her tone. "You're asking me to ignore my heart, to turn away from someone who makes me feel alive." "Sometimes it is our hearts that lead us astray," Margaret said, her voice steady yet laced with sorrow. "You must be cautious. I cannot allow you to rush into something that could destroy you." Lillian felt her chest tighten, the frustration boiling over. "What do you really think of me? Do you believe I'm incapable of making my own choices, of understanding the consequences?" "No, my love," Margaret replied softly, her tone shifting to one of tenderness. "I believe you are strong and capable, but I also know that love can blind us to the realities of our circumstances. I only wish to shield you from the pain I once endured." "Then tell me the truth," Lillian implored, tears brimming in her eyes. "Share with me the burdens of our past so I can make my own decisions." Margaret hesitated, the internal struggle evident on her face. Finally, she sighed, a long, weary breath escaping her lips. "If I tell you, you must promise to approach this with caution. The truth can be a heavy weight to bear." "I promise," Lillian said, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Your father's legacy is complicated," Margaret began, her voice trembling. "He was not the man you believed him to be. The circumstances surrounding his departure from our lives were shrouded in secrecy, and I've spent years protecting you from the truth. But you deserve to know." Lillian listened intently, her heart racing, as her mother unfolded a story that had long remained hidden. "Your father had connections that reached far beyond our small town. There were alliances formed and broken, family ties that intertwined in ways that could threaten our very existence. I was forced to make choices to protect you, choices that led to the life we have now." "Connections?" Lillian echoed, confusion swirling within her. "What do you mean? What does this have to do with Ethan?" "Ethan's family," Margaret continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were part of that world, the world your father tried to escape. I feared that by allowing you to grow close to him, you would unwittingly step into a web of complications that could resurface at any moment." The revelation struck Lillian like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the dark corners of her mind. "So you kept me away from Ethan because of his family? Because of something that happened long before I was even born?" "Yes," Margaret admitted, her eyes filled with regret. "I thought I was protecting you from the shadows that haunted us, but in doing so, I may have kept you from the light." Lillian's heart raced, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. "So, my love for Ethan is not just a simple affair, it's tangled up in a legacy of secrets and lies?" Margaret nodded, her expression somber. "The past has a way of creeping into our present, Lillian. I didn't want you to have to bear the weight of those choices. I wanted you to have a chance at a different life. But how can I live a life that is truly mine if I don't know who I am? Lillian argued, her voice filled with determination. I can't walk away from Ethan without understanding the full picture. Margaret's gaze softened, a flicker of pride breaking through her concern. You are your own person, Lillian. You deserve to make your own choices, even if they lead you down a difficult path. Just promise me that you will tread carefully. I promise, Lillian said, her heart swelling with newfound resolve. I will choose my own path, but I need you by my side. I can't do this alone. As the weight of their conversation settled in, Lillian felt a strange sense of liberation. The truth, while daunting, had opened a door that had long remained shut. She would confront the complexities of her heart and the tangled web of her family's history, armed with the knowledge that she was not alone in her journey. Thank you for trusting me with the truth, Lillian said, her voice steady. I know it wasn't easy for you. Margaret reached out, taking her daughter's hands in her own. You are stronger than I ever was, Lillian. I believe in you. Just remember, love is a powerful force, but it must be navigated with care. With that, Lillian felt the first stirrings of hope amidst the chaos. She would seek out Ethan, confront the complexities of their love, and together they could forge a path through the shadows of their past. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace the possibilities of her future, armed with the truth that had long eluded her. As the sun set behind the horizon, casting a warm glow through the window, Lillian knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was no longer afraid. With her mother's warning echoing in her mind, she understood that love, while a risk, was also a journey worth taking, one that could lead her to a brighter tomorrow. Chapter 10. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the town of Willow Creek, as Lillian stood at the crossroads of her heart. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine, a fragrance that had always brought her comfort, but now seemed to carry the weight of her mother's warning. She had just emerged from a tempestuous conversation with Margaret, one that had laid bare the complexities of love and family, and the promise she had made loomed over her like a storm cloud threatening to unleash its fury. "Keep it platonic," Margaret had urged, her voice laced with both love and desperation. "You must protect yourself from the repercussions of this tangled web we find ourselves in." And so, standing in the dim light of her room, Lillian felt the heaviness of that promise pressing down upon her. The thought of Ethan, with his kind eyes and infectious laughter, filled her mind, yet the reality of their situation twisted like a knife in her gut. Could she truly walk the line between love and loyalty? Would she be able to stifle the feelings that blossomed within her, like the very flowers that adorned her garden? She paced back and forth, her heart a tumultuous sea of emotion. Each step echoed her inner turmoil, the conflict between her mother's wishes and her own desires resonating deep within her. Lillian's thoughts spiraled as she recalled the moment Ethan had proposed, his earnest gaze piercing through the facade she had maintained for so long. It had been a moment of pure magic, yet now it felt like a fleeting dream, slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. As twilight descended, casting long shadows across her room, Lillian's resolve began to waver. The promise had been made under the weight of maternal concern, but the truth of her feelings was a fierce fire that refused to be extinguished. She had promised her mother to keep things platonic, but the very thought of Ethan sent a thrill coursing through her veins, igniting a passion she could scarcely contain. Why must love be so complicated?" she murmured to herself, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "Why must I choose between my heart and my family?" The evening wore on, and Lillian found herself drawn to the garden once more. The moon hung low in the sky, its silvery light illuminating the blooms that danced gently in the night breeze. It was here that she could escape the suffocating weight of her promise, if only for a moment. She stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her skin, and allowed herself to breathe deeply, hoping to find clarity among the petals and leaves. Yet even in this sanctuary, her thoughts quickly turned to Ethan. She could picture him standing there, his smile bright and inviting, the warmth of his presence a balm to her troubled soul. How could she continue to deny the connection they shared? Each laugh, each shared glance had built a bond that felt unbreakable. Yet the specter of her mother's warning loomed large, casting a pall over her every thought. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching, and her heart leapt as she turned to see Ethan emerge from the shadows, his presence a beacon of light in her darkened thoughts. "Lillian?" he called softly, his voice breaking the stillness of the night. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, a mix of surprise and relief flooding her senses. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you," he admitted, stepping closer, his expression a mixture of concern and warmth. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about everything. You seemed, distant today." Lillian swallowed hard, the weight of her promise constricting around her heart. "I've been thinking too," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "About us." Ethan's eyes searched hers, a flicker of hope igniting within them. "What did you decide?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Lillian felt the ground beneath her shift, the very foundation of her world trembling as she considered the truth of her feelings. She could feel the promise to her mother tugging at her conscience, yet the very essence of her being yearned to reach out to Ethan, to embrace the love that had blossomed between them. I promised my mother that I would keep things platonic," Lillian finally confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like a betrayal both to Ethan and to herself. Ethan's expression fell, a shadow crossing his features. "You don't want that, do you?" His tone was steady, yet the hurt was palpable. "I don't know what I want," Lillian replied, her voice cracking. "I feel so torn, Ethan. My mother is afraid of what our relationship could mean, of the secrets that could surface. She wants to protect me, but in doing so, I feel like I'm losing a part of myself." "Losing yourself?" Ethan echoed, stepping closer. "Lillian, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to love and be loved without fear. I thought we had something real." "We do," Lillian exclaimed, her heart racing. "But I don't want to hurt my mother. She's been through so much, and I can't bear the thought of adding to her pain." Ethan's brow furrowed, frustration mingling with his concern. "But what about your happiness? What about us?" "I don't know," she cried, the tears that had been brimming in her eyes finally spilling over. "I don't want to choose between you and her. I feel like I'm being pulled in two different directions." Ethan reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands, his touch warm and grounding. "Lillian, promise me this. Don't let fear dictate your choices. Love is a risk, yes, but it's also the most beautiful thing we can experience. You shouldn't have to hide from it." His words struck a chord deep within her, resonating with the truth she had been too afraid to acknowledge. "But if I pursue this, if I let myself love you, I risk hurting my mother. I don't want to break her heart." And what about yours?" Ethan asked softly, his gaze unwavering. "You deserve to live a life full of love, not one constrained by obligation or fear. We can navigate this together. I'm willing to fight for us." Lillian's heart raced at his declaration, the enormity of their situation crashing down upon her. "But what if our love brings the very chaos you're trying to protect me from?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan's expression softened, and he brushed a thumb across her cheek. "Then we face that chaos together. I would rather have you by my side, navigating the storm, than live a life without you. Please don't let the past dictate our future." As the moonlight bathed them in its ethereal glow, Lillian felt a rush of clarity. Ethan's words ignited a fire within her, a yearning for a life unencumbered by secrets. Yet, the promise she had made to her mother weighed heavily on her heart, a constant reminder of the delicate balance she must maintain. "I need time," she finally said, her voice steady yet filled with anguish. "Time to think about what I truly want and how to approach this with my mother. I can't just ignore her fears." Ethan nodded, understanding etched on his face. "I can respect that, but promise me you won't abandon your feelings. Promise me you'll consider us, truly consider what we could be." "I promise," Lillian replied, her heart heavy with the weight of her words. "But I can't make any decisions until I've spoken with my mother again." "Then let's take this one step at a time," Ethan said, a small smile breaking through the tension. "I'll be here, waiting, ready to face whatever comes our way." As they stood there, the world around them faded into insignificance. The promise exchanged between them was a fragile bond, one that would require nurturing and care. Lillian felt both the thrill of hope and the chill of uncertainty, the path ahead obscured by the shadows of their past. "Thank you for understanding," she whispered, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Always," Ethan replied, pulling her into a gentle embrace. The warmth of his body against hers was a balm to her troubled soul, a reminder that love, however complicated, was worth fighting for. As they lingered in the embrace, Lillian felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. She would confront her mother, lay bare her own heart, and seek a way to honor both her love for Ethan and her loyalty to her family. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time she felt ready to embrace it. With a final squeeze, they stepped back, the connection between them palpable yet delicate. Lillian knew that the promise to keep things platonic was not merely a barrier, it was a challenge to rise above the fears that had long held her captive. "Whatever happens, I won't let fear dictate my choices," she vowed softly, looking into Ethan's eyes. "I'll find a way to make this work." And with that promise, Lillian felt a surge of hope, her heart buoyed by the possibility of love and the strength to embrace the truth. The night was still young, and the path before her, though fraught with uncertainty, shimmered with the promise of a new beginning. Chapter 11. The morning sun cast its gentle rays upon Willow Creek, illuminating the quaint streets and awakening the town from its slumber. Yet, within the confines of Lillian's heart, a tempest brewed, wrought with confusion and trepidation. The night had been restless, sleep had eluded her, replaced by a cacophony of thoughts that echoed the promise she had made to her mother. Now, as she prepared for the day, each movement felt laden with the weight of her secret and the choices that lay ahead. Lillian stood before her mirror, staring at her reflection. The familiar features staring back at her seemed foreign. The girl she once knew was caught in a web of conflicting emotions, her heart torn between love and loyalty. She longed to be free from the constraints of her promise, yet the thought of breaking it filled her with dread. Each moment felt like a tightrope walk, a precarious balancing act between the worlds of her past and the love she yearned to embrace. As she descended the staircase, the fragrance of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, a welcome comfort that eased her troubled mind, if only momentarily. Margaret was already seated at the kitchen table, her brow furrowed in concentration as she perused the morning newspaper. The sight of her mother, a pillar of strength and resilience, both reassured and troubled Lillian. "Good morning, sweetheart," Margaret said, her voice warm, yet tinged with an underlying tension that Lillian could not ignore. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," Lillian admitted, pouring herself a cup of coffee, her movements automatic. "I've been thinking a lot." Margaret looked up, her expression shifting from casual interest to concern. "About what, dear?" Lillian hesitated, the words caught in her throat. She wanted to share her turmoil, to confide in her mother, yet the fear of igniting another fierce discussion held her back. "Just everything," she finally said, choosing the safer route. "School, friends, the usual." "Ah, the trials of youth," Margaret replied, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "It can be overwhelming at times, but you must remember that you are not alone. I'm here for you." Lillian nodded, though the reassurance felt hollow. She was acutely aware of the chasm that had formed between them, a chasm filled with unspoken truths and buried secrets. Her heart ached with the knowledge that her mother, despite her well-meaning intentions, was also the architect of her inner turmoil. After breakfast, Lillian decided to take a walk, hoping that the fresh air would clear her mind. The streets of Willow Creek were alive with the sounds of chirping birds and the rustle of leaves, yet the beauty around her felt muted. Each step she took echoed the conflict within her, a reminder of the duality of her existence. One foot in her mother's world of secrets, the other in the world of her burgeoning love for Ethan. As she wandered through the park, Lillian's thoughts drifted to Ethan. The connection they shared had blossomed into something profound, yet the fear of societal judgment and familial disapproval loomed large. Would her love for him only serve to deepen the rift between her and her mother? She longed to reach out to him, to seek solace in his arms, but the promise she had made restrained her like chains. Feeling a sudden surge of frustration, Lillian found herself sitting on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, its branches stretching high into the sky, as if trying to escape the confines of the world below. She closed her eyes, allowing the sounds of nature to envelop her, a fleeting moment of peace amid the chaos. "Lillian!" A familiar voice broke through her reverie, and she opened her eyes to see Ethan standing before her, his expression a mixture of concern and warmth. "I was hoping to find you here." "Ethan," she said, her heart leaping at the sight of him, "what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he replied, taking a seat beside her. "You've seemed distant lately. Is everything okay?" Lillian took a deep breath, the weight of her promise pressing down on her. "I've just been trying to figure things out," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to her, his gaze penetrating. "You don't have to pretend with me, Lillian. I can see that something is troubling you." "I promised my mother I would keep our relationship platonic," she confessed, the words tumbling out like stones dropping into a well. "And I'm not sure I can break that promise without hurting her." Ethan's expression darkened, the pain in his eyes evident. "But what about us? What about what we feel for each other?" "I know," she replied, her heart aching. "I feel it too, but I've been caught in this web of secrets and obligations. It's tearing me apart." Ethan leaned closer, his voice low and earnest. "Lillian, love is not something to be hidden away. It's something to be celebrated, even in the face of challenges. If we let fear dictate our choices, we'll lose each other." Tears pricked at the corners of Lillian's eyes as she met Ethan's gaze. "I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice trembling. "But my mother, she's been through so much. I can't bear the thought of adding to her pain." Ethan reached for her hand, his touch igniting a spark of hope within her. "You deserve to follow your heart. Maybe it's time to confront your mother, to share your feelings, and let her know how much you care for me." Lillian sighed, torn between the desire for freedom and the weight of familial loyalty. "You make it sound so easy, but what if she reacts poorly? What if I lose her trust?" "Then you fight for it," Ethan urged, his grip tightening around her hand. "You're stronger than you think, and whatever happens, I'll be here with you." Lillian felt a rush of gratitude for his unwavering support, yet the thought of confrontation filled her with dread. What if she can't accept it? What if she sees me as a traitor? Ethan's gaze softened, his expression filled with understanding. "You're not a traitor for wanting to be happy. Your mother may need time to process, but love is worth that risk. You owe it to yourself to be honest." As they sat together beneath the oak tree, Lillian felt the warmth of Ethan's presence enveloping her, a comforting reminder that she was not alone. Yet the reality of her situation loomed large, a storm cloud that threatened to engulf her. "Maybe I should talk to her?" Lillian said, her voice tentative yet laced with determination. "But how do I even begin?" Ethan smiled, a glimmer of hope reflecting in his eyes. "Start with the truth. Tell her how you feel, how much I mean to you. She may surprise you." With his words echoing in her mind, Lillian felt a flicker of courage ignite within her. Perhaps it was time to confront the shadows that had haunted her for too long. The thought of facing her mother filled her with trepidation, yet the possibility of love beckoned her with a siren's call. As the sun began its descent, casting a warm glow upon the park, Lillian made her decision. She would talk to Margaret, share her heart, and seek a path that honored both her love for Ethan and her commitment to her mother. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to take that first step. "Thank you for being here," Lillian said, squeezing Ethan's hand. "You give me strength when I feel lost." "I'll always be here for you," he replied, his voice filled with sincerity, "no matter what happens." As they sat beneath the oak tree, holding hands and sharing unspoken dreams, Lillian felt a sense of calm wash over her. The weight of her secret still pressed heavily upon her, but the prospect of facing it head-on infused her with newfound determination. She would navigate the complexities of her heart, confront her mother, and seek the love that felt so right. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Lillian stood, her heart racing with anticipation and fear. "I should get home," she said, her voice steady. "I need to prepare for our conversation." Ethan rose with her, his presence a steady anchor in the uncertain waters ahead. "I believe in you, Lillian. No matter what, you have the power to shape your own destiny." With a final glance at the park where they had shared their hopes and fears, Lillian took a deep breath, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. She would confront the worlds that had been torn asunder by secrets and lies, and in doing so, perhaps she would find the truth that would set her free. As they walked away from the oak tree, hand in hand, Lillian felt a sense of hope blossom within her. The promise she had made to her mother weighed heavily on her, yet The love she felt for Ethan ignited a fire that refused to be quelled. She would not allow fear to dictate her choices any longer. She would forge her own path, one that honored her heart and the relationships that mattered most. The journey ahead would be fraught with uncertainty, but Lillian was ready to embrace the tumultuous path toward love and truth. With Ethan by her side, she felt empowered to face whatever storms lay ahead. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, she knew that the time for secrets was drawing to a close, and the dawn of a new chapter was on the horizon.